Something's not quite right here. Hang on. Oh yes. It's better. Bit of feng shui. Bit of feng shui. That's the dog. Mark, come on! I'm trying to record a video here. Right, that's Monty. Quiet now. We're going to talk about this image, and I'm going to go through my editing process because this image was edited a little bit more than my usual images. So if you haven't watched the video that I shot last Wednesday with this image, I would definitely recommend just clicking here and giving it a little watch. It'll make this whole thing make a lot more sense. So I get a lot of comments asking how I stitch my panoramic, and it's so easy, it's incredible. It's just, you know, it's almost not worth me doing a tutorial type video on stitching the panoramic. But what I will do is show you how I edited this image, including the panoramic bit, because I probably did more to this image than I do to a lot of my images. To be honest, my editing varies from image to image. I certainly don't have a set style. You know, some images I'll go to town on, and some images I'll just let them be. This image is probably in between town and let them be, somewhere in the middle. So I'm just going to get straight into this and start editing and show you what I did. What I would say is with this image, it was, I think the reason I like this is because the effort put into finding this scene. I knew what I wanted, but I couldn't find it anywhere, and I spent days exploring woodland just with the dog, just looking for little pockets, little areas of interest in acres and acres of woodlands. It's, you know, that type of photography is difficult, but when you find an area of interest, it's really rewarding. So I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to get into this, show you how I edited it, and then we'll take it from there. Okay. So here are my 9 raw files that I shot more than I need to. I usually shoot more than I need to when doing a panoramic. So let's go into Photo Merge, Panorama. And this is going to give me a nice preview. So you can see here that there's a bit of white at the top, a bit of white at the bottom. That means my tripod was pretty level. I've not done a bad job here. And I usually opt for the spherical option when stitching my panoramics. They usually work well for my images, or best for my images. And here we have the panoramic image. So yeah, you can see there's a bit of white at the top, a bit of white at the bottom, that'll need cropping. So I'm gonna go for a classic 6:17 crop, which is a fine ratio for panoramics. There's some distractions at the bottom here. There's that footpath, and obviously all these highlights at the top, they need to go, and most of that can be gotten rid of just by adjusting my crop. This is a big enough file, and I have a lot of crop factor. Okay, I love these colors on the left. I want to keep as much of that as possible. Just tweak it on the right here. It's just playing with it until it looks right. Use your eye, try and make the image feel as balanced as possible. So now I've cropped it, we have a nice raw panoramic to work with. That's more or less where I want it. So the first thing I'm going to do is my basic editing. I'm going to start with highlights. Let's have a look. I'm going to bring those all the way down to -100 because they are quite bright. I'm just going to adjust my shadows here, probably not as much. Right, let's see if I just bring the shadows up to, yeah, about mid-40s. That tends to work quite well. And I'm just going to go through, this is like my default editing panel here. So highlight, shadows, then I'll adjust the contrast just to give that a nice, nice pop because it's looking a little bit flat. There we go. I don't want to overdo the contrast, especially because I've just lifted those shadows. So it's looking a bit cool at the minute. So what I want to do is actually bring this up to daylight. So daylight white balance is somewhere between 5,000 and 5,500 Kelvin. So I'm just going to bring this up to probably just over 5,000 Kelvins, which is a daylight white balance. Now that looks lovely and warm, lovely and golden, but it does look a bit green. So I'm actually going to introduce a little bit of magenta here just to see if we can lose some of that green wash that we have. Let's have a look. That seems to work well. That just makes it feel a bit warmer, a bit more brown. Yeah, before it was just too green. What can I say? My exposure looks pretty good actually. I'm just going to bring up a tiny bit, and I'm going to introduce a little bit of saturation. You don't want to go mad with this, just a touch, just to give it a little bit of pop. There we go. Now, if I go down to the HSL panel, you can actually introduce or increase the saturation of selected colors. So with this, I want to bring up the oranges and the yellows. Obviously, that's way too much and far too strong, as you can see there. So I'm going to bring that down to, yeah, about there, about 30 odd, 30. That's nice. And I'm just going to bring up the yellows as well. I'll make that, there we go. That just looks better, a bit more punchy. So the next thing I want to do is to sharpen the image. Now, I certainly don't want to over sharpen this, and you'll see why shortly, but I'm just gonna boost it up a bit, and I'm gonna mask it so that only the areas I want sharpening sharpen. So if I hold down Alt, you can see here that the white areas are the areas that are going to have sharpening introduced. And now what I'm going to do, which is a little bit unusual, I'm actually going to introduce a bit of vignetting into the image. This is because I want the viewer to feel like they can walk into the forest. So you wouldn't necessarily associate vignetting with a panoramic, but in this case, I want the focus to be in the center of the trees where most of that lovely light is, and it's to pull the viewer into the forest. That's what I'm trying to achieve here. And that's more or less it. I just want to get rid of these highlights you can see at the top. Actually, I could probably afford to crop in a little bit more, which is going to make that job much easier in Photoshop. Okay, so let's have a look here. Just tweaking my crop once again. I've got plenty of pixels to do that. Okay, so now I'm just going to open this image in Photoshop, Photo Edit in Adobe Photoshop, and there we are. And now I can start working on getting rid of these distractions at the top, these highlights. And honestly, I'm not a Photoshop wizard, so I'm just gonna, we'll just see what I can do here. I'm just gonna pull the crop down a bit more, actually, make my job easier. So let's start off by selecting this highlight, and we'll go for a content aware and see if Photoshop can do a good enough job. Hopefully it can. Oh no, that's terrible. Okay, so next I'm going to use is a patch tool. The patch tool is great. If I drag this to an area that's similar to the area I want to cover, Photoshop will pretty much balance out the colors and tones and make it match. Let's have a look down here. There we go. See, it's matched the color there. And it's good, but there is that. I've dragged it to an area with a big black twig. That's no good. We need to get rid of the twig. Bit of content aware. Bosh, does the job, no problem. I'm now just going to continue with the same method using the patch tool and get rid of a few of these distracting highlights. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because if people don't know that it's there, then people aren't going to go looking for it. Obviously you know it's there because I'm showing you, but if I didn't show you this, you wouldn't know to go looking for photoshopped areas of highlights missing. It's just, it's not what we do. Right, okay, so that's, I'm happy with that. The highlights have gone, there's nothing distracting. I'm now going to do something that Nick Page, always give credit to Nick Page when I do this little effect, and you can see Nick's video here. He explains it much better than I'm going to, but all I'm going to do, it's called the Orton Effect. I'm just going to duplicate my layer, blur the top layer, not too much, you know, I still want to retain detail. There we go, that looks pretty good. Okay, now that that's blurred, I'm going to add a levels adjustment layer for my levels and just give it a lot of punch, almost burn out the highlights, bring down the shadows, and that's going to give it lots of contrast. Now, this is an assault on the eyes, so don't stare at this too long. Give yourself a break. And if we get rid of that layer here that I've just adjusted, you can see how flat it looks. And it's not that the image is flat, it's just that the image that the image, you know, the duplicated image with the super high contrast and the bright lights and the shadows and everything, that makes this feel flat. It's because your eyes haven't adjusted. I'm waffling on a bit. Okay, let's crack on. So now essentially we have two layers. The top layer, which is the one that's all blurry and super contrasty and saturated, and I bring that opacity down to 0, and then I bring it back up to from anywhere between 10 and 20%. In this case, I'll probably go around 10 or 12%. And you can see the difference. I'm going to click through it. There we go. Off, on, off, on, off, on, off, on. And it's a very, very subtle difference, but it gives the image a glow and gives it pop. And now one final thing I need to do is all the glowiness and the poppiness. I really just want that in the leaves, and not the tree trunk. So very, very loosely with no precision at all, I'm just gonna paint out each tree basically. All I've done is added a layer mask, so I'm getting rid of that Orton effect on the tree trunks essentially. And there we go, that's going down there nicely. Get rid of this one and we'll get rid of the next one, and that's pretty much job done. It's such a subtle effect that I really don't need to pay too much care nor attention to this. And we'll just do the last one now. And there we have it, that is the finished image. So that's the image complete, and if you actually want to go in and pixel peep and look at the image in full resolution, you can do that. I'm going to stick a link in the description below, and it's actually a cool website. It's a new website and I haven't used it much. I've just have the one image on there, but it looks awesome. It's called Prodibi.com, and you can host your images at full resolution and zoom in. It's all really smooth and fluid, and as far as I'm aware, again, I haven't looked too much into this, but I plan on doing so. It looks awesome. As far as I'm aware, you can embed that into your website, so you can safely, and I say safely because of all those image thieves out there, you can safely host your full resolution images so people can see your images, and especially with the sensors that we've got these days, the GFX 50S, the Nikon D850, you know, the Sony A7R III. These are all huge, sort of super high megapixel, high resolution images, and you really want to show them off. So yeah, you can click on a link and see this image in full res, and I actually plan on uploading a lot more of my images to this website. Right, I'm done and finished. I've got to go and sort some stuff out. So until next time, thank you for watching. Bye for now.